You know what? This is a good exercise. I'll try to show you how the channel mixer works in a visual way. Because I can draw matrices and talk about like mathematics and numbers and everything. But let's try to make it visual. So we don't need this for a second. We don't need the channel mixer for a second. So bear with me. This will be some setup. So I think I will need 1, 2, 3, and then I will need like 6 more. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And these are the ones I'm going to use. So I'm going to group them like so. The first group is going to be the red, right? I'm going to actually make this red. The second one will be green. So this is blue. This is going to be green. Okay. So these groups are going to represent the output channels, okay? Hopefully I can actually make this work. So those will represent the output channels. Now inside them, all 3 images will represent the sliders. So this is going to be red slider. I'm going to call it red. I don't know how easy it is to read, especially like behind my face, like up here, right? But I'll try to like show it in a way. Let me name them. Red slider, and this is going to be like the green slider, and this is going to be the blue slider. Oops, I didn't write slider. Oh my god, the world is going to end. Let me see if I can actually like, yeah, I can. Okay, good. So I'm just trying to color code everything just so that it's easy to read. And you know what? I'm actually going to copy those. So I'm going to just grab these and, okay, can you actually grab them? Thank you. And copy these in, because that's what I need in for every one of those. Deleting those. I want to delete the copies from there. Sorry, this is some. I need some time to set this up, but I think it's going to be worth it. Just the copies like irritate me. I think I'm just excited about this experiment, so bear with me. All right, let's rename the red to output, right? I want to be very clear so that it's easy to follow. But whenever it's like behind my head, I'll try to like close things. Okay, so I need those. Now I need to make sure that I can actually put together the channels themselves, right? And for that, I will need, I think I need a black solid color as like the background, right? And we need to add these things together. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the red output. Again, this is still the setup. There's still the setup. I'm going to go into the red output and I'm going to turn off all the other ones for now, just to make it much easier for me. And I think if I turned off these, then let me just see what that would actually show. It doesn't, if I go to normal, okay, good. That's actually what I wanted. Let's try this. Hopefully this works like that. And then if I go into the green one, I'm going to turn off all the other ones. And with just the green slider, I'm going to like turn on the green here. And pushing this to normal as well. Okay, that's good. Then into the blue, turning off all the other ones. I actually should have like copied everything because I'll probably copy everything anyway. So we have these, right? So let's make up the image. Let's see if we can make up the image. If I turn this to normal, no, actually from normal to, I think linear dodge might work in 16. Does it work in 16 bits? Okay. So you see how from the outputs, so this is the first step. From the outputs, I can actually make up the image. So we have the black. We have black, right? This is where we start from. Like there is no light. We start adding light that we are coloring blue. That's one thing. And then we start adding light that we are coloring green. And then we start adding light that we are coloring red. And eventually we get back to the image, right? Because with linear dodge, we are just adding like all of those values together. But this doesn't really explain the channel mixer yet, because what I want to try to do is now I want to turn these things on, right? But as I turn these things on, it becomes this like too light thing. So I need the separation, and I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to copy that here. I need the red slider here, turning, and then I don't need the blue here. Again, still setting up. Still setting it up. I'm just doing it in a very weird, like in a very slow way, because I'm making it up as I go. Like, this is not something that I've done before, but I think I can make this happen like very, very nicely, like very visually, right? So now we technically have all of those. What we want to do is we want to add the sliders together as well. This slider should be add, this slider should be add, and all of those are added, right? So if all of them are added, what we do is we go in the green, and I start lowering this to 0, for example, and I go to the blue and lower that to 0. And then in the green output, I lower this to 0, and that to 0. And then here I lower these to 0. I know it's not visible because it's behind me, but that's not the right one. But that already shows what I'm talking about. Okay, this is perfect. This is perfect. We are getting there. We are getting there. We're almost there. I'm going to group these as like a background, just so that it's out of the way. Background. And I'm going to delete, or actually, because I need this to like compare. So this is how you can imagine visually what the channel mixer does. So we have these 3 groups. We have a red output group, we have a green output group, and we have a blue output group. Now those correspond, if you go into the channel mixer, to the output channels. So red, green, and blue. Those are the groups that we have. These are what we have as groups. Now inside the groups, we have these sliders represented as images, okay? So if I expand the red output, then I have a red slider, I have a green slider, and I have a blue slider. These are color-coded on the left side, so you can see which one I'm talking about, right? So those sliders are technically visual representations, like actually like copies of the image, only using single color channels, and they are mathematically and visually as well added together, right? So for example, because if I turn everything off, we have black, which means we have 0, right? We have 0, and we start adding things, like, as I said, not just visually, but mathematically as well. We add something that we are painting blue, and then we add something that we are painting green, and then we add something that we are painting red. Now, up to this point, you all know what I'm talking about. Like, this is just basic RGB, and this is how your channels work. If you look here, this is very, very simple. But then, as I said, where it comes to be very kind of difficult to wrap your head around is, so then how is it that I can add green to red? Like, how does that work? Especially if I just like add things together, right? Well, the way it works is that adding things together is, or like adding more of something, like adding more of the green or adding more of the blue, basically just corresponds to like the amount of light. And the amount of light that we're filtering through those tints, like the red, green, and blue, right? So for example, if I expand the red output as I did before, as I said, these 3 represent these sliders. And this green slider is on 0% opacity, and this blue slider is on 0% opacity. As these like blend together, I can actually start to add more of, for example, the green to make it greener, right? And that starts to add, like literally plus more of the green there, like adding it all together, right? By this amount. And that's how you're making up the red channel. So this red output is equivalent to your red channel. And because we start pushing in more and more of the green into the red channel, things get brighter and brighter, but at the same time, they start taking on more of this green hue. Same thing goes for, like, for example, if I go to the blue slider and I start upping the opacity here, you can see how I can introduce more of the blue there, right? But I'm only introducing it technically to the red channel is what I'm doing. So I'm just making that red channel brighter by the values of those other channel, right? So if I wanted to make sure, which is the important part about the channel mixer, that's why you see this constant down here and the total as well. I want to make sure that it's 100%, so we don't actually make it brighter or darker. In that case, what I need to do is I look at these opacities that I created. So on this part, so these values need to make up 100%. So the green is currently 17, right? The blue is currently 31. Let's make the blue 30 so that it's easier to calculate things. Let's make the green, I don't know, 20. So all we need is that those are 50, right? So from the 50, what I want to do is, because this is 100 and that's 20, this is 30, that's 150. So now if I go down to 50 with this, then my total is actually going to come back to 100%. So it is adding green values to the red values. Can you turn off the other two channels so we can see the effect of just adding green to the red? Since it is only adding all layers, is there a difference between adding green to the red or blue? Oh yes, absolutely. That's a good question. So now I put it to 100%, like total, like the red output. So I'm going to just, like, as you asked, turn off the blue and the green. And this is what you see here, right? So this was kind of the before, and we started adding to it. So now the green channel is somewhat shifted into like a pinkish value. Even though the output doesn't look pinkish, right? The output looks bluish or cyanish. And the reason the output looks cyanish or bluish is because you started taking out some of the red. And as we know from the from the curves adjustment, like panel, for example, if you go to the red channel, you can see that on the other side, we always have cyan, right? The other side of red is cyan. So because our red is on 50% opacity, which means that we technically have less red in the red channel, because of that, our picture is more cyan, right? Is what is happening here. So if I turn these off, you can see how, like, the red channel is kind of dark, whereas it wasn't that dark before. So if I go back to 100%, oops, that's 10. If I go back to 100% and I turn these off, you can see how this was quite bright, right? If I come back down here, this is so much darker. And because we don't have as much red contribution there, it's not going to look red anymore. It's going to look the opposite of that, which is cyan. So this is how the channel mixer works in one of these outputs. Now, you can start mixing all of these together, and you can technically basically create anything you want. Like, for example, we can treat it more as like a curves adjustment layer here. So if we say that, oh, this is too cyan, let's introduce some, for example, some magenta, right, to counteract the greenish values. Then what you want to do is you would want the green to be more green, if that's possible, right? But how would you do that? Like, if you look in the channel mixer, you can technically go 200%, right? So we can just probably multiply, like make more of the green channel if we wanted to make it more green. But if we wanted to make it more magenta, we need to go the other way. So we start like lowering the opacity of the green, and you can see like we are taking out the greenish values there, right? And that's basically what we're doing. And then, because now this is missing a lot of red because we have a lot of blue, or missing some yellow because of that, we can start adding more of the red in here. You see how I'm able to play around with this, just like in curves adjustment? And now it's becoming quite red, quite magenta. So if I go down to like this bluish state, and then I go into the blue output, and I start lowering the blue opacity, you see how we are getting back the image just much darker because we lowered a lot of those values. We are able to like balance all of this out because these just add on top of one another, right? And that's why you have the total there. That's why you have to make sure that the 100% is the 100%. All of that really does matter. I think visually this way makes more sense than just like sliding values, because you know how we made these things up. Because if I turn this off, like we have the blue output here. Like if I start turning these things off, we have this blue slider here, which is like at this value. And then if I add these other things, this is just nothing because those are all on like 0%. But if I start, like, for example, upping the green here, and I turn this off, you can see that this was the before and this is the after. Like, we are adding more and more to it. And then I can add back the green output, I can add back the red output, and we are back to this green image because I added more green into the blue, which is the way it works. You're kind of like shifting this matrix of values. What was that? Can you switch with the original so I can see the effect? Oh, you mean like the whole original image? So like this? And I showed you this before, but I'm going to like write this here again because now it might actually make more sense. So all we are doing is look at the red output. Like if you look at the red output, if you take this as like red O output. Oh, you mean like the darker version? I'll do that in a second. Let me finish this thought, and then I'll do that in a second. So here's what we're doing. This is the group, like the red output group. All we are doing there is we're taking the opacities, right? We are taking the opacities, which we can represent on a 0 to 1 scale. So 1 is 100%, 0 is 0%, 0.5 is 50%. So we are doing that, and we are saying like, hey, in this case, because if I go in here, the red slider is 50%, the green is 20, and then the blue is 30. So what we're doing here with the equation, which will make it quite clear, is that we are taking 50%, right, of the red. So 50% times red. That's all we are doing here. And then because we're using the adding operation, we are just adding more to it. So then we are taking 0.2 times green in this case, right? And then we are adding one more to that, which will be I think it was 0.3, which is 30% times blue, right? And that becomes the output of that channel. That's all there is to it, right? That's how we are calculating that. Because if you look at the red slider, it's 50%, the green slider is 20, and then the blue slider is 30. And we add them all up, but we also multiply them by the opacities. And by that logic, by the way, I can just take like the next one, right? And I can be like, okay, so what's the green output? The green output in this case is red 25, so that would be 0.25, right? I'm going to write 0.20 just so that it lines up nicely. But otherwise 0.25. The green is 55. I'm going to say 0.5 just so that it lines up. And then the blue is 0. So let's call that what it is, 0. And that's how you get that channel. And then you do the same thing with the blue as well, right? You do the same thing with the blue. I think these were like 0 and then 0. And then the blue was something like 0.5 or something, right? So that's how you get those values. And then on top of that, like after all of that, because what we're doing is like getting like a result, right, out of all of that, we are just taking the R output and plus G output plus B output. That's the end to the whole thing. Thanks. I was trying to darken while controlling the colors. You can do that, but that's a very simple thing to do, right? Because if you don't really want the colors to shift anywhere, because here is the if I duplicate this, I'm going to keep this as like the modified one, and I'm going to start like showing you what the default values are. So this is the red output default values, right? Like, look at that. That's the red output's default values. Now, if you look at the green output's default values, then you probably have already guessed. It's actually, yeah, that's correct. And then the blue default output values are like that, right? It's basically a matrix. And if you look at the channel mixer, this lines up quite well, right? Like look at the equation up here. I look at the output channel for the red, and I can see that red is 100% and everything else is 0. And then if I go into the green, you can see that everything else is 0 except for the green, which is 100%. So for us, that's 1, right? And then for blue, that's the same thing for blue. Now, if you just want to darken the image while also controlling the colors, well, like making sure that the colors are kind of the same, that all you have to do is just lower those like 100% values, right? Because if I lower the blue, for example, to 50%, then I get this like yellow, of course, but then I go into the green and I lower the 100% of the green to 50% as well, right? Then I get this color, but then I go into the red, lower it to 50%, and I basically lowered the brightness of those values because I basically turned down the opacity of those three layers that I showed here, right? In these groups. That's all you did. And turning off those, because you're doing this equally, you're not shifting the balance anywhere. Now, if I were to put everything to 50%, except for example, I don't know, for example, the blue, right? Because the blue would be 75 instead. Then you see how it shifts towards blue. Let me turn these stupid stuff off. That one as well. So you can see how it shifts to blue then, right? But if everything else is 50%, but this one wasn't 75, but it was rather 25, then you can see how that pushes everything to yellow because you're taking out the blue and it's not balanced anymore, right? So think of this. So if this is the single output, and then on the other output you have this one, right? And then you have the last one, which is the blue. What you want to do is you want to balance this value with this value and with that value, right? Because while they are balanced, everything is going to stay the same except you're pushing more brightness or you're pulling out some of the brightness, right? You're darkening the image. But immediately as these are not equal in this equation, so this thing becomes unbalanced and will shift the colors where you have more. So if you had 2 of the red, for example, this is not going to write 2, but let's say you had 2 here, then you're actually going to shift it towards reds. But if you had 0.5, which is 50%, then it will shift towards all the others and away from the reds, which is, as we know, is cyan. Hopefully that makes sense. So this balance thingy is what's difficult, I think, about the channel mixer. So in here, as you see, if I go back to 50, all is balanced. The image doesn't really change too much. It just gets darker. I can do the same, by the way, the other way as well. Like, let's say it's 150, which means it's very, very blue because it's unbalanced now. But if I push everything else to 150 here, all that happens is we're just brightening the image while also keeping the same colors there. I know it's a difficult thing to understand because of the way we think about colors, but I think this actually helps a lot. At least I know that me thinking about these like that way, like think of the channels as like mini images, like mini RGBs, right? So because that's basically what we are representing here. And that's how you can like balance these things out.